I want to go back to real estate. So we talked about the stat, right? The less than 1% of developers are Black and Hispanic. That report, which I'm going to link to at the bottom for people who want to read it more, it also talked about medium-sized Black real estate developers. So people who already are successful, they still aren't making the revenue that's comparable to their white counterparts, even their Hispanic counterparts. And so we talked about capital being a concern, but can you talk a little bit more about what your take is of like what we need to do in order to advance further and get the revenue?
So this is something that will have to take place over generations. It really, cannot be addressed fully in one generation, because real estate is a long game. A lot of the folks that we see who have these very big companies, equity funds, they've been around for generations, right? So they have generations of money. Even if in this, city, whatever city, viewers may be in, look around at the businesses, they have generations of money. And so you can do things differently if you have generations of capital behind you versus if you're starting over every single generation. And so I think that, you have to be where you are, as frustrating as that may be. And my first property, I bought the house next door to mine. We were living in Arlington, Virginia. I bought the house next door. I could look out my window and see it. It was a terrible investment, right? And there are those. You make terrible investments along the way. But, I started with something that felt manageable to me, that was small. Next property I bought was a fourplex, four units in an apartment building in DC. It was small, but it was, the thing that I could do. And the neighborhood, I sometimes tell this story about how I'd be out there cutting the grass, and I knew all the, the drug dealers and the people sitting outside. It wasn't a good neighborhood, right? But it became a very good neighborhood. And so I think that, just being willing to put in the work and just start small, I think you can just kind of build on small beginnings.
Okay, so for somebody who is a Black mom or anyone really, and they're saying, okay, I want to start in real estate, what's the first thing that they should do? They have no background. They're just like, what's the first thing they should do to get ready, get prepared?
Yeah, I would say own your own home and maybe rent out your basement. That's easy, right? Live in a little bit less space, because it teaches you some really valuable lessons. But, also whatever you can make an income space. There's, shows on HGTV, income properties. They have so many shows now. And I just think that there's so many ways to enter. Maybe don't take on a construction project. If you have no background in construction, maybe that's not your first stop. But you may be able to, rent out your basement or move into a duplex or something like that. Move into an apartment building and you live in one of the apartments. I did that recently. I lived in one of the apartments in a building that I owned, and it was fun. I got to know my tenants in a way that I had never known tenants before, and we created a little community, and so it was a fun experience. I don't suggest it long term, but it was fun while it lasted.
And then what about people who say, so this sounds great, right? We were talking about help, right? Getting the help, starting small, owning our own home, but we also struggle to get the capital, right? And so how can we personally, what are some ways for us to personally get the capital we need to get started, or even to get the help to support us as we build?
So when I was growing up, my grandma was always in our house, right? Grandma, and lots of people have this experience. The family was a little bit closer, a little bit tighter. There were cousins, there was grandma, there were aunties. And we don't necessarily have that today. And so I think if that is not something that you have and you have a family, you do need to invest in the help. If that's something that you have, kind of lean on the family. Because I think family is just a beautiful thing and shouldn't be taken for granted, and can be so helpful as you're raising your family. People raise their families. So that's the first thing. Once you kind of get the kids settled and that piece, because I know as moms, it's really hard to work if you don't feel like your kids are okay. You really can't do anything. And so once you get, the family settled, the kids settled, I think the next thing is to look at what you can cut out of budget, out of your own personal budget. So it's not necessarily about how much more you can make. It's sometimes about how much you can keep. And so if you can cut things out, I wanted to buy a property. I lived in a tiny house for 4 years, 475 square feet, 4 years. Wow. And I was able to save enough money to, buy something bigger, right? And so I think that it just kind of thinking outside of the box about capital. Okay, yes, I can make more, but also I can save more. And if I save more, it has the same effect as making more. And that money I can then use to buy, something else. We now have a house that's like 6 times the square footage of our old one, but it's like we started there because we had a goal in mind.